Canadians have been consuming like their American counterparts. Only one issue is that Canada didn't see the deleveraging that occurred during the financial crisis. It has been full steam ahead the entire time. That's great news, many will say. Well, no coincidence, I happen to disagree. The amount of debt that Canadians are carrying is the worst ever in history. No worries though, since this time is different, right? You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Today we're going to look at the economic crisis that is going on in Canada right now. I also want to cover the US, do some comparisons. Let's begin. Canada household debt to income ratio holds near record high. This is a very important indicator that I have been following for years. I've been showing you on this channel. I talked about it in my book, and you will see what has happened. The amount of credit market debt in the household sector as a percentage of disposable income was 170.4%, down slightly from 170.5% in the third quarter. Understand what this means is that individuals in Canada are in the most debt they have ever been, ever. We're not talking about just a lot of debt. We're talking about historic levels. The amount of debt Canadians are holding, which now rests at about the size of Canada's total output, remains a primary concern for policymakers. The nation has relied on consumption for growth, and rising interest rates could dampen that strength. Okay, remember that word consumption. Keep it in the back of your mind. What we can see here with interest rates is that they have been slowly but surely ratcheting up the rates. This is a very big problem for Canada specifically because of how important real estate is. It is the only thing left in the Canadian economy. So remember that as interest rates rise, just 25 basis points, 0.25%, this is becoming a greater problem very quickly. We have people that have been gambling on margin. We have individuals who have been borrowing every possible way. And I'll get into that more in just a moment. I'm going to show you this chart. Canada's borrowing binge, household debt as a percentage of their income. And you will see it's at 170%. The average individual, they've been borrowing every possible way that they can. They buy a car, they will finance it, or they will lease it. They buy a home, they get the absolute maximum mortgage that they can afford, putting down the minimum that they can, and they hold that mortgage as far out as they can. That is a terrible idea. You want to get rid of all of that debt. Although many people will disagree, we'll get into that further in a minute. But this is what's happening in Canada, whether you like it or not. Individuals are spending. They're using their credit cards at the most ever. Student debt, home equity line of credit. You can see the second mortgages that are going on right now. You can see also the line of credits that are available from banks or alternative lenders. Then what about all of the payday advance? You know, your whole money marts and your cash monies and all these businesses. They give you money when you're desperate, when you need it. Individuals in Canada are using these businesses at levels they've never seen before. They're popping up all over the cities. And it's a service that's provided, of course. Some individuals need it. Desperate times, desperate measures. But the fact that they are increasing and their usage is increasing spells disaster. Now you can see what has happened here. This debt to income ratio increasing consistently. It presents us with a very big problem, particularly as interest rates rise. Canadian household debt well above the US peak. We are looking at the household debt as a percentage of disposable personal income. In the US, leading up to the housing crisis, leading up to the financial crisis, you had seen this here. Everybody was yelling and screaming. And then eventually we see deleveraging, as I mentioned in the introduction. In Canada, however, everything just continued to rise further and further and further. And that's not a good thing. Because ultimately, all of this growth cannot be sustained on debt alone. We need actual assets. We need investments. We need a good economy, a strong Main Street. That's not happening at all. In fact, if you look at the stock market in Canada, it's doing terribly. Real house prices surging in Canada. In the US, you saw what happened. The whole subprime crisis, the housing boom, everything was doing great. And then we saw the disaster that happened after. But of course, it has risen yet again. In Canada, there was a small blip on the screen during this time frame. Many cities, in fact, the bigger cities didn't even see a decrease in price at all. And it just continued onward and upward. And now we're at the levels that have truly become astronomical. It's not ever something that can be recovered. It's not something that could ever be restored without some sort of deleveraging. You need mass levels of deleveraging, of bankruptcies to occur in order for order to be restored. Maybe that's counterintuitive to some, but it's just the way it is. Cracks starting to show in Canadian credit quality. So, they're talking about the deterioration of consumer credit, something that I have been talking about for years, and the situation is much worse today than it was those years ago. And it was extremely bad before. Now I don't even know the word for it. The roll rate, the percentage of credit card users who roll from early stage delinquencies to 60 to 89-day delinquencies reached the highest since 2008 for one credit card program, while delinquencies for another program were above the 10-year average. And you would think this is a quote from the Money GPS, but it's not. Cracks are starting to show in more and more places. Understand that what we are seeing here is historic. Whatever's going to happen, it's going to make history. So we are living in exciting times, no doubt. But it's not a good thing. It's not a positive thing. I'm going to talk about something in just a moment, but hang in there. Net charge-off rates on credit card loans. This is for all commercial banks, okay? I'll show you something else in a second. But look at this. Financial crisis, dot-com boom and bust. The last times that this has happened, well, we had some terrible situations that occurred right after. And look at where we are today. I'm going to put a question mark there, but you tell me. Every time it happens, we have a situation on our hands. And you could also notice, by the way, that the effect is worse each time. So I suspect that this could spike up dramatically. Net charge-off rate on credit card loans, but this is not all. This is just the banks not in the top 100 by assets. And you can see that it hits the levels not seen since the financial crisis and the dot-com boom and bust. Big mistake that's being made right now. See, the big banks, they're going after the prime and hire borrowers. They want to get good quality. And so they opened up this opportunity for those who are below the, let's say, most desirable credit scores and credit worthiness, where you can basically suggest to everyone here that individuals who can't get debt through their primary means will simply seek it through alternative means. This is what they're doing, and this has been a very big problem. That's exactly what subprime was all about. Builders wanted Canada construction employment jumps. Looking at this, going higher and higher. You talk to people in Canada, this is a good thing. They talk about the fact that this puts people into work, they have jobs, well-paying, maybe some benefits, maybe some, pension money, who knows? But construction, generally, they'll say it's a good thing. And I could definitely see the points on that. But you have to understand this, particularly if you're not from Canada. What we are seeing today, the economy is not doing well. The stock market's doing absolutely terribly. And then you have the real estate market. Somehow, this one market has sustained this, I don't want to say growth, but let's just say it's prevented the crutch from being knocked out under the feet of Canadians. As time goes on, it's going to be more difficult because of interest rates rising. Real estate, if you think about it, you have commodities involved. That's imports and exports for other countries who love it when Canadians are building homes and they're importing copper and they're importing everything else. That's something. Then you also have to factor in all the other occupations. Real estate lawyers, real estate agents or realtors. You can see that there are inspectors involved, and there's the banks and the mortgages and the lenders and the, everybody all across the line. If you hire people to come into the house to renovate, you have the painters and the electricians and the carpenters and this and that. And then you go to buy things for your home. So you have to go to, your stores and buy couches and different furniture and appliances. That's all commodities. That's all materials. That's all labor. So it does keep the economy going. That's good, right? Unfortunately, though, it's being fueled by debt. It's not being fueled by reality. And they can't get out of debt. So what's going to happen? Well, they're going to become delinquent. From delinquency, they're going to become bankrupt. If you start having bankruptcies, you need to watch out. Don't go anywhere. Make sure you watch the second part of this video. I'm going to get into what derivatives are and how they will affect both the Canadian and the US housing market and financial system. See you there.